Yesterday, we did make reference several times to what's happening at the global level. So at the global level, there is an initiative that's just been launched, the Global Initiative for Information Integrity and Climate Change. I think someone referred to it as GEEK yesterday. I'm not sure we want that necessarily to take hold as the characterization of this event. We'll ask Charlotte about that shortly. But I think it's important that we get a sense of how that movement began, how it's going to feature at the Conference of the Parties coming up, what's expected from that, and also what's expected of us, those of us who want to support this initiative, whether as a country, as an organization, or as individuals. So this is going to take the characterization of a structured conversation. So I'm joined here today by Charlotte Scaddan. She's the Senior Advisor on Information Integrity at the United Nations Communications Office. She's going to tell us more about the mandate of that office shortly. And also Camille, who's the Executive Director for the Forum on Information and Democracy. Its mandate goes beyond information integrity, and he's going to give us an idea of how those other work streams work for his organization. And also his organization is also leading efforts for the other Conference of the Parties on biodiversity, which is being hosted by Armenia. And just for your reference, at the end of the day, we are going to be having a conversation with the Deputy Secretary from the President's Office in Brazil. So she's the Deputy Secretary for Digital. Brazil's been doing great, very innovative work in the digital space, and like Europe has kind of moved the yardsticks forward in terms of digital governance. So we'll have an opportunity to talk to her about that, but also preparations for the Conference of Parties in Belém in November. So let me just move over here, and we'll start our conversation on the initiative. So first of all, Charlotte and Camille, just we'd like to hear more about your organization, your mandates, and how you position those mandates in terms of what you want to accomplish on global information integrity.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. And I had not heard GEEK. I have to say, though, I've heard worse acronyms. I mean, we do love an acronym at the UN. So, but I think maybe that's our task for this weekend. We have to put our heads together and find a better short version of the initiative. But yeah, just to maybe zoom out and give a little explanation of where I sit and our approach at the UN to information integrity. So I work in the UN Secretariat, which is, the tall building that you see in New York, reporting in directly to the Secretary General. And I work specifically for the Undersecretary General for Global Communications. But information integrity has become a priority area at the UN. Over the last several years, I think there have been various points at which the organization has had what I sometimes call an awakening around information integrity. The COVID pandemic, obviously, the war in Ukraine, various crises and conflict situations that we face around the world, and then, including, of course, in the Middle East. And then the threat to our thematic issues and priorities, including climate change. So the Secretary General, I think, was quite visionary about this. He recognized the need to address risks in the information landscape and look at our information environments and understand better what was going on quite some time ago. And he asked us to come up with a framework for action, which we did, the Global Principles for Information Integrity, which he launched a year and some ago. And these are really a set of recommendations for stakeholders across the information ecosystem, including governments, including media, including big tech, including civil society, and of course, aimed at ourselves at the UN, for how we can really scale up and strengthen the information environments around the world to address what we term information risks, which is misinformation, disinformation, hate speech, risks around emerging tech, such as, obviously Gen AI, also lack of media freedom, media viability, and that's where we've worked a lot with, Camille and other colleagues, censorship and lack of freedom of expression. Our focus is not just on addressing disinformation, but making sure that people have access to reliable information and a multiplicity of pluralistic information sources. So we've been for the past year and some trying to really operationalize the Global Principles document, which is effectively a very long policy document, with our colleagues around the world. And we've been doing that, in different settings. So some focus on peace and security issues around attacks, disinformation campaigns around our peacekeepers, for instance. And then we've been trying to apply it to our priority areas across the SDGs. We really have found, even though there is a dearth of research, which I know we'll come to, and we need to understand more what's going on. It's very clear to us from the discussions we have had with experts across the world, with governments, with all the different stakeholders, and frankly from our own offices everywhere, that these risks such as disinformation, hate speech are undermining progress across the Sustainable Development Goals and across all of our UN priorities. And we're not going to be able to achieve those goals unless we figure out what's happening and do something about it. So we have been working to integrate information integrity into all of our work, actually, across the UN. And my team sits at the crossroads. It's a very small team, but we sit at the crossroads of research, policy, and communications. So we're doing the research to understand better what's happening, looking at the policy space to see what recommendations we can make and how that's being implemented, but then also looking at different solutions, including strategic communications. And we coordinate the UN system around information integrity. There are pockets, small pockets, some teams working on info integrity in the system, including our colleagues in peacekeeping. So it's an emerging area, I would say, in the UN. I mean, something can be 10 years old and still be emerging at the UN, but it's definitely an emerging space. But it's very vibrant, and I think it's definitely getting a lot more attention now. One thing I'll mention before I finish is that in July, the first ever UN Global Risk Report was released. And in that, it was a survey of experts across the world. Mis and disinformation was identified as the top global vulnerability for which the international community is not sufficiently prepared. This was actually very closely followed by environmental risks. So, we can come to that a bit later when we talk about the global initiative and our climate work. You see very much those two risks going often hand in hand. So there is increasing awareness and increasing focus on this area of work. So I feel in a way very lucky to be working on it at this moment, but it's also a big challenge.
Thank you so much for having us this morning. Je suis toujours ravi de venir au Canada parce que ça me donne la possibilité de parler quelques mots de français. Donc je vais en profiter et je pense que c'est assez important avant de retourner à l'anglais d'aussi pouvoir avoir cette discussion dans nos langues maternelles, puisque c'est des concepts qui sont parfois très compliqués, des discussions qui sont parfois très techniques, et donc c'est aussi important de les avoir dans les langues avec lesquelles que l'on maîtrise le mieux. Having said that, I'll go back to English. So thanks again for having us. C'était très peu de français, but I'm also mindful of my dear colleague Charlotte. No, thank you. Look, what can I say? So, I mean, I totally, the work that Charlotte in the UN on information integrity has been doing really reflects some of the work that we've been doing. The Forum on Information and Democracy, I will try to do the more institutional presentation. We were founded in 2019 to facilitate the implementation of an intergovernmental agreement based on quite high-level principles for democratic information and communication space. Basically, the premise was we were seeing and witnessing, back in 2018, that we started to have a problem with the information ecosystems. We had Cambridge Analytica, we had flows of disinformation going around. And Reporters Without Borders, the organization that founded the Forum on Information and Democracy, started to realize that it's one thing to try and, as Charlotte was explaining, it's one thing to try and fight against disinformation, but we also want to make sure that people have access to reliable information and that they actually have a right to reliable information that should be respected. And this goes then in a broader spectrum of what are the norms and principles that we want for our information and communication space. These principles, they were set out by a Commission on Information and Democracy, and just to name a few, I hope you can see where I'm going with this one specifically is, for example, the neutrality, the ideological and political neutrality of tech companies and digital platforms. And what we see today is that we have one owner of one big tech company that has a lot of influence on public debate, that has put all these machine, very powerful machine for political gains and for political projects, which necessarily has some impact on access to reliable information and pluralistic views and so on. So all these principles were set out in this Partnership for Information and Democracy in 2019. We now have 56 countries that have endorsed this non-binding agreement, and the Forum on Information and Democracy was founded to articulate civil society organizations and academia with the government. Something we've seen very early on, and we still see, is that any democratic country that would try to implement some rules for information and communication, they would always have some part of society that will say, oh, well, you want to censor our voices, or this is the Ministry of the Truth. So we wanted to have really civil society organizations at the heart of the implementation mechanism in a way to legitimize the necessary rules and regulations that need to be implemented. Since 2019, we've been working a lot on the promotion of these principles, some of them taken over by the UN in the Global Principles for Information Integrity and in a lot of different international processes. We've also developed a lot of policy frameworks to end disinformation, for the media sustainability, for pluralism online, accountability regimes, the impact of AI on information ecosystem. So these are very long, a little bit boring reports, but they're all available. And one thing that we're trying to do right now is take this broad concept that is information integrity, and then as with climate change, for example, but I can say that a bit more, but put it into very concrete and very targeted and maybe more focused issues, including, for example, information integrity on private messaging systems. We've seen a lot of propaganda, disinformation, including climate disinformation going through WhatsApp, Telegram, and the others. So how do we target these issues in a concrete way without harming the right to encryption and so on? One last word, getting back from the why we launched this initiative, is that we also were convinced that we needed high-level political moments on these issues. And so we hosted 3 ministerial summits on information and democracy, 2 in New York, 1 in Paris, and we are planning for the upcoming one. And I really think that we need both. We need high-level political moments that will help us move the agenda forward, and we also need the technical day-to-day work on these issues.
Merci beaucoup, Camille, et Charlotte aussi. I wonder if you can contextualize this movement in terms of climate change. So I understand the principles that each of your organizations are adopting and are fomenting are much broader than information distortion. It gets into censorship issues, accessibility to information. That's all about our broader information ecosystem. I wonder if you could contextualize now how you see the global movement on information integrity as contributing to climate action, and what you expect specifically on the road to the Conference of Parties in Brazil, where UNESCO, the UN, and the government in Brazil have adopted information integrity as one of the key themes for that Conference of Parties.
Yeah, sure. So for us at the UN, we see 2 very urgent crises converging with when it comes to climate. So obviously we have the climate crisis, right? And I don't need to tell anyone here how the existential challenge that we face there. But then we also now see this, information integrity crisis. And I mentioned earlier, the global risk report that, identified these two risks as very high. And I think this is something that we've been tracking for quite a long time. The IPCC, I think it was in 2022, identified disinformation, misinformation around climate as a risk. And I think this there's been this very interesting convergence of a movement of climate activists and those working on the information space who understand the importance of seeing these two issues as kind of one threat, right? So we know, and I think it's become clearer to us the longer that we work on this, that our ability to achieve our internationally agreed climate goals and achieve meaningful climate action is completely being undermined by efforts around climate disinformation. And these have been around for a really long time. I mean, obviously everyone's aware of the decades-long campaign by the fossil fuel industry, some of it in plain sight, actually, and a lot of this is in plain sight when it comes to climate, to undermine climate action and maintain the status quo. But I think what we've seen is that, especially with the rise of digital and the transition to renewables as that's moved forward, we've seen it take on different characteristics. And some of it is now very targeted. It's very targeted at local communities. It's very targeted at policymakers and decision makers. It is very much goes hand in hand with the big tech companies that Camille mentioned, but also the advertising industry and others who I think the Secretary General has said have become climate change enablers. So, there's a whole array of tactics and behaviors that are being adopted by many different, groups that are impacting climate action. And, it's very clear, and I think there's a big civil society movement that has recognized this. I see some civil society friends, Michael's over there, for quite some time. And it's really clear that we absolutely have to ensure that we have climate information integrity, so access to reliable climate information, and that we're frankly calling out and addressing some of these behaviors in very direct terms in order to be able to move things forward. We know that these the disinformation campaigns and other tactics will always spike around key moments, and they will always spike when progress is moving forward, right? So every COP, it will be the same. The GA, the General Assembly in New York is about to happen, it will be the same. Climate Week, it will be the same. So because we know that, it's actually easier for us to prepare, right? And try and guard against it. One other thing I would mention, though, is that we see now in the climate information integrity space, there's really a two-pronged challenge. One that I just mentioned, which is the more kind of traditional fossil fuel and some government interests trying to undermine climate action. But now we've seen in recent years, climate has been adopted as a wedge issue. So the adversarial actors who have really no stake, frankly, in, like climate action or not, that's not their strategic goal. Their strategic goal could be entirely political and entirely unrelated, or it could be entirely financial and unrelated, or it could just be to sow chaos in a certain community or country context. They recognize that climate is a very useful polarizing wedge issue. And it's been caught up in the kind of woke agenda narrative that we see that's often used against the UN, civil society, and some governments. And that is extremely worrying because the climate's being pulled in to disinformation and hate campaigns, which we see spiking around elections, really with the aim to undermine democratic processes. So our message, actually, including to governments, but also others, is don't silo this as just a climate issue. It's not. Actually, this is a democracy issue, and this is an issue of societal cohesion and stability. So I think, I don't know if that answered. I'm trying to remember what your original question was. I've kind of like gone off on one, but that's basically how we're seeing the climate space and why it's become so urgent to us.
I try to be brief. First of all, we will be celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the Paris Agreement. They were signed in 2015. I don't think back then we were thinking of the challenges that we would face today when it comes to information ecosystems. Clearly, that wasn't. Don't feel that it was a priority. It is clearly now. And it's great to see this movement happening for us, coming from the information integrity part of the information integrity on climate change. I'm not an environmental activist, although I care, of course, but my work is really focused on information integrity. And one thing that I'm really pleased to see today is how from, I would say, a big group, but really working, and we had some experts in communication, in press freedom and media sustainability and so on, but expanding that to other groups is really critical at this stage. And we need all the forces that we can get with us. So bringing in the climate activists, bringing in the gender activists, bringing in the civil society activists in the broadest sense possible is really important, and ensuring that I think Charlotte said that mainstreaming these information integrity debates to all the places that we can. And this has been, at the forum, we've been trying to do that with our friends at the Open Governance Partnership, with now with the COP. So it's really trying to mainstream these issues in a broader sense.
So unfortunately, we only have time for one more question. So I'm really going to pack a lot into it. So we have here activists, practitioners, civil society organizations, also people from the Canadian government. And I wonder what your message is to all of us here. You've made a plea that we should all be joining this movement. But what is it that you would like to see us bring to the movement? What is it that you want to accomplish through it? And is this something that you see culminating in terms of at least the climate change application at the Conference of Parties, or do you see this as an ongoing initiative? And so what are the expectations for that in terms of shaping this going forward so it becomes part of kind of the playbook that we have globally? Just a small question.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll try and be as quick as possible. But, Camille touched on multi-stakeholder coalitions. It's such a UN term, which I hate, but it's annoyingly accurate, because that's what we need. We need, we are not going to be able to address this alone. So, and everyone does have a role to play. So but my message is, we are going to have to deal with this sooner or later. If you work in a government, if you're a researcher, this problem is not going to go away. And in fact, it's only going to get worse. We don't even know, none of us know right now what the impacts of emerging tech, including Gen AI, are going to be. But we see very clear risks. So we are going to have to act on this, and the sooner we can act on it, the better. I think, as Camille said, climate is a great opportunity to start mainstreaming information integrity into an intergovernmental process. And frankly, we need more research. We need more funding for that research, but also for strategic action and solutions. We need to increase the scope of our understanding to the global south, because so much of what we know, frankly, is focused around a few countries and in the language of English. So we need to understand better what's going on and how people are being targeted. And we need evidence-based action. We need to really understand what works to mitigate some of these risks, and then, put it into place. And to answer your question about COP, no, absolutely not. The idea is not that this would end with Belém. Belém, though, COP30 is a huge opportunity. Information integrity has been added to the COP action agenda for the first time ever, which is a big step forward. It's action agenda, it's item 30 of 30, so that's how new it is. This gives us an opportunity in Belém to really raise the profile of this issue. I mean, there's a lot of plans for what's going to happen, but we also are aiming to integrate information integrity into the outcome document. And for that, we need countries on board, and we need negotiating teams on board, because we absolutely need this to be a core part of our action moving forward. It's not something that can just be, the project of one COP. We need it. We need it to be carried forward and something that needs to be reported on and implemented by all the different parties.
This and now, just for the government officials who are in the room, and I'm trying to get into the US tomorrow, so I'll try not to say too many complicated things, given the state of freedom of expression on the other side. But hold the line, please. Don't just hold the line. We have, and we'll hear from Nina later today. Brazil is really showing the example right now in terms of how do we address the challenges that we need to address, and really, just keep going. Canada has been really at the forefront of this debate. So this is one thing I wanted to mention. The first global declaration on information integrity was launched by Canada in 2023, so exactly 2 years ago. Together with the Netherlands, and so we can really appreciate the leadership that Canada has taken in this debate. And yeah, then I would say two things. All the public policies that you can put in place will be welcome in terms of regulation, in terms of I don't know what the debates on C18 law, but keep working and keep pushing for better remuneration for the media, for certain rules when it comes to information ecosystems. And the second is, and again with maybe some gaps of the understanding of the Canadian context, but a good coordination amongst different ministries. One thing we are seeing, and this is great to see that we have more and more Ministry for the Environment who are tackling information and working on information integrity. We also have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the world. We also have the Ministry of the Economy, the Ministries of Culture, and find a way to coordinate and put a lot of resources on that and be really ambitious. One thing I'm seeing in other contexts is sort of a dilution of resources. And the Ministry of the Environment is going to do its observatory, and then the Ministry of Health is going to do its observatory. It's really rationalize this as we go mainstreaming, also have some sort of, concerted efforts on how we address this.
Well, thank you very much again. We will have more opportunity to engage on this issue and also to ask questions at our closing plenary when we'll be joined by Nina Santos, Deputy Secretary of Brazil. But please join me in thanking Camille and Charlotte for this session.